The morning sun broke over the Wyoming plains like liquid gold spilling across an endless canvas. And that was when Samuel Gardner first saw her, a silhouette against the blazing horizon that made him pull his horse to a complete stop and wonder if he was seeing a mirage after 3 weeks on the trail. She stood alone on the prairie, miles from anywhere civilized, her dress torn and dusty, her dark hair whipping in the wind that carried the scent of sagebrush and possibility. Samuel urged his bay, gelding forward slowly, his hand instinctively moving away from his revolver because something about her stance told him she was more frightened than dangerous. And as he drew closer, he could see she was young, maybe 25 at most, with eyes the color of storm clouds that had seen too much too soon. "Madam," he called out, his voice rough from days of little conversation except with his horse. "Are you hurt? Where's your wagon?" She turned fully toward him then, and he could see tear tracks through the dust on her face. Her clothes had once been fine, the kind a respectable woman would wear to church or a social gathering, but now they were stained with travel and what looked like dried blood on one sleeve. She took a step back when he dismounted, and he held up both hands to show he meant no harm. "I do not have a wagon," she said, her voice steadier than he expected. "I walked from the way station 15 miles back. I had to leave everything." Samuel glanced around at the empty prairie stretching in every direction. 15 miles was a hard walk for anyone, let alone a woman in a dress and what looked like ruined button-up boots. "The Jackson Way Station. Madam, that is rough country between here and there. You are lucky you were not caught by wolves or worse." "I am running from worse," she said simply, meeting his eyes with a directness that caught him off guard. "I am running from my past." He studied her for a long moment, taking in the way she held herself despite obvious exhaustion, the proud set of her shoulders even as she swayed slightly on her feet. Samuel Gardner had been raised by a mother who taught him to respect women and a father who taught him to trust his instincts. And right now, his instincts told him this woman was genuine in her fear and deserving of help. "My name is Samuel Gardner. I have been working cattle up near the Montana border, heading back to Calistoga now. That is about 20 miles south of here. There is a doctor there, a hotel, decent folks." He kept his voice gentle the way he would with a spooked horse. "I can take you there if you want. No questions asked if that is how you prefer it." She seemed to consider this, her eyes searching his face for something, maybe trustworthiness or maybe just the absence of cruelty. Finally, she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "My name is Teresa Emerson. I would appreciate the help, Mr. Gardner. I can pay you when we reach town. I have some money sewn into my dress." "Keep your money," Samuel said, leading his horse closer. "Calistoga is where I am heading anyway. You will ride, I will walk for a spell until we get to Big Creek. There is water there, and we can both rest before the final push into town." He expected her to argue about propriety or insist she could walk, but Teresa Emerson just nodded again and allowed him to help her into the saddle. Her hands were rough when they gripped his, the hands of someone who had done real work despite the fine dress. Samuel noticed everything, the calluses on her palms, the way she sat a horse like she had done it before, the careful way she did not meet his eyes as he adjusted the stirrups for her shorter legs. They moved south at an easy pace, Samuel walking alongside with the reins in his hand, the July sun climbing higher and turning the prairie into a furnace. He had given her his canteen, and she sipped from it sparingly. The mark of someone who understood water was precious out here. For the first hour, they did not speak beyond his occasional comments about the land or warnings about gopher holes that could trip up the horse. "I appreciate that you are not asking questions," Teresa finally said, her voice drifting down from the saddle. Most men would demand to know everything by now. Samuel looked up at her, shading his eyes against the sun. Figured you would tell me what you wanted me to know when you were ready. Your business is your own unless it affects my safety or yours. It might affect both, she admitted quietly. The past I am running from has a way of catching up. He considered that, his boots crunching through the dry grass. Is someone following you? Should I be watching our back trail? Probably. My husband is not the type to let go of what he considers his property. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Former husband, I should say. I left him 3 months ago in Kansas City. I thought I had gotten far enough away, but he found me at the way station yesterday. I ran into the night and just kept going east, then north, then I do not even know anymore. I just walked until the sun came up and you appeared. Samuel felt anger kindle in his chest, the kind that came from seeing injustice. Did he hurt you? That blood on your sleeve. That is his blood, Teresa said flatly. He tried to drag me back to the wagon he had brought. I grabbed a bottle from the station keeper's table and broke it over his head. Then I ran. I do not know if I killed him or just knocked him senseless. And honestly, Mr. Gardner, I do not much care either way. The honesty in her words struck Samuel as brave rather than callous. He had seen enough of life on the frontier to know that some men treated their wives worse than they would treat livestock, and the law often looked the other way as long as a man did not kill his wife outright. Women like Teresa had limited choices when it came to escaping bad situations. Well, he said after a moment, if he is following, he will have a hard time tracking through this country. The wind has been erasing footprints about as fast as we make them. And once we get to Calistoga, there are enough good people there who do not take kindly to men who mistreat women. Sheriff Daniels is fair-minded even if he is getting on in years. I cannot go to the law, Teresa said quickly. Legally, I am still his wife. We married in Missouri 5 years ago. The law will side with him, tell me I have to go back. That is how it works, Mr. Gardner. I am his property by law, even if he beats me bloody every Saturday night after drinking. Samuel's jaw tightened. She was right, of course. The law was not built to protect women from their husbands, no matter how brutal those men might be. Then we will not involve the law unless we have to. But you will need somewhere safe to stay, and Calistoga is still your best option. It is a mining town, lots of people coming and going. You could blend in, maybe find work. There is a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is tough as nails and does not ask too many questions about a woman's past. You seem to know the town well, Teresa observed. I grew up there, Samuel said. My father had a ranch about 10 miles outside town. He died 2 years ago, my mother 3 years before that. I sold most of the ranch but kept a small section with the house. I have been working as a hired hand for bigger operations, saving money to buy back some of what I sold. The dream is to rebuild what my father had, run cattle again on my own land. That sounds like a good dream, Teresa said softly. Honest work, your own place. I used to have dreams like that before I married Roger. I thought he was going to give me a good life. He was charming when we courted, said all the right things. I did not see the monster underneath until after the wedding, and by then it was too late. They reached Big Creek around midday, a ribbon of water cutting through a stand of cottonwood trees that offered blessed shade. Samuel helped Teresa down from the horse, noticing how stiff she was from the ride and the walking she had done before. He caught her when she stumbled, her legs giving out from exhaustion, and for a moment she was in his arms, light as a bird and just as fragile. Sorry, she murmured, embarrassed. I have not eaten since yesterday morning. Why did you not say something? Samuel guided her to a flat rock near the water and made her sit. From his saddlebags, he pulled out jerky, hardtack, and a small pouch of dried apples. "It is not fancy, but it will keep you going." She ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, while Samuel watered the horse and refilled the canteen. The creek was running clear and cold from the mountain snowmelt, perfect for drinking. He soaked his bandana in the water and offered it to her so she could wash her face, and she accepted it gratefully, scrubbing away the dust and dried tears until her skin was pink and clean. With the grime washed away, Samuel could see that Teresa Emerson was beautiful in a quiet, enduring way. She had strong features, high cheekbones, and a mouth that looked like it wanted to smile but had forgotten how. Her dark hair, when she unpinned it and ran her fingers through to remove the tangles, fell nearly to her waist in thick waves. She was probably around 24 or 25, he guessed, though the hardness in her eyes made her seem older. "How old are you, Mr. Gardner?" she asked, catching him looking. 28 this past April," he said, feeling heat rise in his face at being caught staring. "Old enough to know better than to make a fool of myself, but apparently not old enough to succeed at that." A small smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. "You have been nothing but kind. That is not foolish, that is decent. I had almost forgotten what decent men were like." They rested for an hour, sitting in the shade while the horse grazed on the grass growing near the water. Samuel found himself telling her about his parents, about growing up on the ranch, about the hard winter of 1877 that killed half their herd and broke his father's spirit. She listened without interrupting, her gray eyes focused on his face with an intensity that made him feel truly heard. "Your father sounds like he was a good man," Teresa said when he finished. "You talk about him with real love. That is rare, I think. Or maybe I just have not been around the right people." "What about your family?" Samuel asked. "Are they still in Missouri?" Her expression closed off immediately, and he knew he had stepped on painful ground. "I do not have family anymore. My parents died when I was 16, cholera on the wagon train west. I was supposed to go live with my aunt in California, but she died before I got there. I ended up in an orphanage in Kansas City, and that is where I met Roger. He came to the orphanage looking for a wife, a young one who would be grateful for a home and not ask too many questions about his business. I was 18 and stupid enough to think I was lucky." "You were not stupid," Samuel said firmly. "You were young and alone and trying to survive." "That is not the same thing." She looked at him with those storm cloud eyes, and he saw something shift in them, maybe the first crack in the wall she had built around herself. "Thank you for saying that. Most people would say I made my bed and should lie in it, that I should have known better." "Most people are jackasses," Samuel said bluntly, and this time she laughed, a real laugh that transformed her whole face. They reached Calistoga as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town sprawled along the valley floor, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around the main street, with the mountains rising like sentinels on three sides. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Samuel could hear the distant sound of piano music from one of the saloons, and the rhythmic pounding from the stamp mill processing ore from the nearby silver mines. He took Teresa directly to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, a two-story structure painted white with green shutters and a wide porch where several residents sat enjoying the evening cool. Mrs. Patterson herself came out when she heard the horse, a stout woman of about 60 with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Samuel Gardner," she said, looking him up and down. "Heard you were up in Montana. Figured you would show up eventually looking for a hot meal and a soft bed." Then her gaze shifted to Teresa, taking in the torn dress, the exhaustion, the way she held herself. "And who is this?" "This is Miss Teresa Emerson," Samuel said, using the honorific deliberately. "She ran into some trouble on the trail. I told her you might have a room available and could use help around the boarding house." Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed slightly, and Samuel knew she understood everything he was not saying. The widow had helped more than one woman escape a bad situation over the years, and she had never been one to judge. "Is that so? Well, Miss Emerson, I do have a room on the second floor. It is not fancy, but it has a real bed, clean sheets, and a lock on the door. In exchange, I could use help with cooking and laundry. The miners who board here are not easy on their clothes, and my arthritis makes the washing harder every year." "I would be grateful for the work," Teresa said, her voice steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "I am a good cook and I do not mind hard work." "Good enough," Mrs. Patterson said briskly. "Samuel, help her down and then bring her inside. I will show her the room and get her settled. You can stable your horse at the livery and then come back for supper if you want. I made stew, and there is plenty." The room Mrs. Patterson gave Teresa was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a cheerful quilt, a washstand with a china pitcher and bowl, and a window overlooking the mountains. There was a chest of drawers, a chair, and pegs on the wall for hanging clothes. After a lifetime of frontier practicality, it was nothing fancy, but to Teresa, who had spent the last night running through the darkness, it must have seemed like heaven. Samuel said goodbye at the door to the boarding house, suddenly awkward now that they had reached their destination. "I will check on you tomorrow if that is all right. Make sure you are settling in." "I would like that," Teresa said, and the warmth in her voice made his heart do something strange in his chest. "Thank you, Samuel. You saved my life today. I will not forget that." He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would let her know he was glad he had found her, that he wanted to know her better, that something had shifted in him during their long walk across the prairie. But the words stuck in his throat, so he just tipped his hat and headed for the livery, feeling her eyes on his back until he turned the corner. Samuel did return for supper, sitting at the long table in Mrs. Patterson's dining room with half a dozen miners and a traveling salesman. Teresa served the food, moving quietly between the kitchen and the dining room, and if the men noticed she was new, they were polite enough not to comment beyond thanking her for the stew. Samuel caught her eye once during the meal, and she gave him a small smile that made the miners' rough conversation fade into background noise. After supper, Mrs. Patterson pulled him aside in the hallway. "Is someone looking for her?" "Probably," Samuel admitted. "Her husband." Former husband in her mind, though not in the law's eyes. She said he was bad to her, that she finally got away. Mrs. Patterson nodded grimly. "I have seen that story before. Well, she will be safe here as long as I have breath in my body." "But Samuel, you need to think carefully about getting involved. Men like that do not let go easy, and if he comes looking, there could be trouble." "I know," Samuel said, "but I cannot just walk away. She needs help." "She needs more than help, boy," the widow said shrewdly. "And unless I miss my guess, you are already halfway to falling for her. Just be careful. The heart is a dangerous thing to follow in situations like this." Samuel could not deny the truth in her words, so he just nodded and headed out into the evening, his mind full of storm cloud eyes and a laugh that had sounded like hope. The next morning, Samuel was at the boarding house early, ostensibly to check on Teresa, but mostly because he could not stop thinking about her. He found her in the kitchen garden behind the house, helping Mrs. Patterson harvest vegetables for the day's meals. She had borrowed a plain calico dress from the widow, and with her hair braided and pinned up, she looked more rested than the day before, though still too thin and still carrying that wariness in her eyes. "Morning," he said. suddenly feeling like a boy calling on his first sweetheart. "I thought I might show you around town if you have some time. Mrs. Patterson, if you can spare her for an hour or so." "Go on," the widow said, waving them away. "I can finish this myself. Teresa has already done more work this morning than I usually get done in a whole day. She has earned a break." Calistoga in the summer of 1881 was a town caught between its rough mining camp origins and aspirations of civilization. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with a mix of false-fronted buildings and more permanent structures built with actual brick or stone. There was a general store, a telegraph office, 2 saloons, a bank, a doctor's office, a dressmaker's shop, and a church at the far end of the street with its white steeple pointing toward heaven like an accusation. Samuel walked Teresa through the town slowly, pointing out landmarks and introducing her to the people who mattered. At the general store, he introduced her to Walter Morrison, who ran the place with his wife. At the telegraph office, he made sure she met the operator in case she ever needed to send a message. He steered her away from the saloons but made a point of introducing her to Doc Henderson, a gruff man in his 50s who had seen everything and judged nothing. "If you ever need medical help, day or night, you come find Doc," Samuel told her as they walked away from the doctor's office. "He does not care if you can pay right away. He will patch you up first and worry about money later." "You are trying to make sure I have people I can trust," Teresa said, and it was not a question. "You are building me a safety net." "I am trying to give you what I had growing up," Samuel said honestly. "A community, people who will look out for you. The frontier is hard enough without facing it alone." They ended up at the small restaurant near the hotel, where Samuel insisted on buying her lunch despite her protests. Over plates of roast chicken and potatoes, she told him more about her life, filling in the gaps from their conversation the day before. She talked about Roger's business, which she had eventually realized involved gambling and probably some criminal activities she had not wanted to know about. She talked about the growing violence in their marriage, the way he would explode over nothing, the bruises she had learned to hide under long sleeves and high collars. "The last straw was when he said he wanted to sell me to one of his business associates to settle a debt," Teresa said quietly, staring at her plate. "He said it would just be for a few nights, that I should consider it my wifely duty to help him. That was when I knew I had to leave or die there. So I waited until he passed out drunk one night, took what money I could find, and got on the first train west." Samuel felt rage boil in his chest, hot and righteous. He should be in prison for even suggesting such a thing. He should be in prison for a lot of things, Teresa agreed. But men like Roger do not see prison. They are too connected, too clever at playing the system. The only way I could escape was to run, and I have been running ever since. Kansas City to Denver, Denver to Cheyenne, Cheyenne to that way station where he found me. I thought 3 months was enough time, but I was wrong. "You are not running anymore," Samuel said firmly. "You are here now, and you have people who will stand with you, starting with me." She looked up at him then, tears shimmering in her gray eyes. "Why? Why would you risk yourself for someone you just met? You do not owe me anything, Samuel Gardner." "Maybe not," he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "But my mama raised me to believe that when you see someone in trouble, you help. And my daddy taught me that a man is measured by what he does when it would be easier to walk away. Besides," he added, his voice softening, "I like you, Teresa Emerson. I like your strength and your honesty. I want to know you better if you will let me." The tears spilled over then, running down her cheeks, but she was smiling through them. "I would like that too. You are a good man, Samuel, the kind I thought did not exist anymore." Over the next few weeks, Samuel found excuses to be in town almost every day. He helped Mrs. Patterson with repairs around the boarding house, fixed the sagging steps on the front porch, replaced some rotted boards in the stable, anything that gave him a reason to be near Teresa. And she seemed glad of his presence, her smiles coming more easily, the wariness in her eyes slowly fading as she settled into the rhythm of life in Calistoga. They fell into a pattern, Samuel showing up in the mornings to walk with her to the general store or to simply sit on the porch and talk while she shelled peas or mended clothes. She told him about her childhood in Ohio, the farm her parents had owned before they sold everything to join a wagon train west. He told her about his dreams of rebuilding his father's ranch, running cattle again, maybe raising horses too because he had always loved horses. "What kind of life do you want?" Samuel asked her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "After everything you have been through, what would make you happy?" Teresa was quiet for a long moment, her hand still on the shirt she was mending. "Peace," she finally said. "A life where I do not have to be afraid every time I hear footsteps behind me. A home that is really mine where no one can hurt me. And maybe," she added, glancing at him sideways, "someone to share that life with who sees me as a person, not property." "That does not seem like too much to ask," Samuel said softly. "You deserve all of that and more." "Do I, though?" Teresa's voice was bitter. "I made terrible choices, Samuel. I married the wrong man. I should have seen what he was." "You were 18 and alone in the world," Samuel said firmly. "You did the best you could with what you knew, and you had the courage to leave when staying would have destroyed you. That takes strength, Teresa. Real strength." She set aside the mending and turned to face him fully. "You make me believe I could have that life. The peace, the home, the person who sees me. When I am with you, I feel safe for the first time in years." Samuel's heart pounded as he looked at her, her face soft in the fading light, her eyes full of something that looked like hope mixed with fear. "I want to be that person for you," he said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside him. "I know it is too soon. I know you are still healing from what he did, but Teresa, I need you to know that I am falling for you, hard and fast and completely." "Samuel," she whispered, and there was wonder in her voice. "I am falling for you too. I did not think I could feel this way after Roger, did not think I had anything left to give. But you make me want to try. You make me want to believe in good things again." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers, and they sat like that as the stars began to emerge overhead, connected by touch and by the fragile, growing thing between them that neither wanted to name yet, but both could feel. The trouble came on a Tuesday morning in mid-August when the heat was pressing down on the valley like a physical weight. Samuel was at his small ranch house, working on fixing a section of fence that had been damaged in a summer storm, when he heard the sound of a horse being ridden hard. He looked up to see one of the miners from Mrs. Patterson's boarding house galloping toward him, the man's face red with exertion. "Samuel!" the man shouted, pulling his horse to a stop in a cloud of dust. "You need to get to town now. There is a man at the boarding house looking for Miss Emerson. Mrs. Patterson sent me to fetch you. She said you would want to know." Samuel was on his horse before the man finished speaking, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anger. He had known this was coming, had been half expecting it for weeks, but that did not make it any easier now that it was here. He pushed his gelding hard, covering the 10 miles to town in less than an hour, and arrived to find a small crowd gathered in front of the boarding house. The man on the porch was tall and well-dressed in a suit that must have cost more than most miners made in a month. He had slicked-back dark hair, cold blue eyes, and the kind of handsome face that probably charmed a lot of people before they saw the cruelty underneath. Roger Emerson, for this had to be him, was arguing with Mrs. Patterson while Teresa stood behind the widow, her face pale but determined. "I told you," Mrs. Patterson was saying, her voice sharp as broken glass. "The lady does not want to go with you. This is my property and I am asking you to leave." "The lady is my wife," Roger said, his voice smooth as oil, "which makes this a domestic matter, not your concern. Teresa, get your things. We are leaving." "I am not going anywhere with you," Teresa said, her voice shaking but clear. "I left you, Roger. We are done." "You do not get to decide when we are done," Roger said, and now steel crept into his voice. "You are my wife. The law says you belong to me. Now stop making a scene and get in the wagon." Samuel pushed through the crowd, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "The lady said she is not going. I suggest you respect that and ride on." Roger's cold eyes fixed on Samuel, assessing him like he would assess a gambling opponent. "And who are you?" "A friend," Samuel said evenly. "Someone who does not take kindly to men who threaten women." "I am not threatening anyone," Roger said, spreading his hands as if to show he was unarmed, though Samuel could see the bulge of a concealed weapon under his coat. "I am simply trying to bring my wife home. This is a legal matter. We were married in Missouri in 1876. I have the marriage certificate right here." He pulled a folded paper from his inside pocket. "So unless you want to be charged with interfering in a legal marriage, I suggest you step aside." "She does not want to go," Samuel repeated. "That should be enough." "The law does not care what she wants," Roger said flatly. "She is my property by law. Now I will ask one more time. Teresa, get your things." Teresa stepped forward, moving around Mrs. Patterson to stand beside Samuel. "I will not." "You can show that certificate to anyone you want, but I will not go back to you, Roger. I would rather die." Roger's face darkened with anger, the charming mask slipping to reveal something ugly underneath. "You broke a bottle over my head and left me bleeding in a way station. You stole money from me. That makes you a thief and possibly an attempted murderer. I could have you arrested right now if I wanted." "Then do it," Teresa said, her voice steady now. "Arrest me. Put me in jail. At least there I would be safe from you." The crowd murmured at that, and Samuel saw several of the miners shifting position, hands moving to their own weapons. Calistoga was a rough town, but it had its own sense of justice, and that justice did not include forcing women to return to abusive husbands. Roger must have sensed the mood shifting against him because he changed tactics, his voice becoming almost pleading. "Teresa, sweetheart, I know I have not been the best husband, but I love you. I came all this way to find you because I cannot live without you. Please, just come home and we will work this out." "You beat me," Teresa said, and her voice rang out clear in the morning air, carrying to everyone in the crowd. "You hit me, kicked me, told me I was worthless. You said I was your property to do with as you pleased. And then you tried to sell me to one of your associates like I was a horse or a piece of furniture. That is not love, Roger. That is ownership, and I am not yours anymore." The crowd's murmuring grew louder, angry now. Samuel saw Sheriff Daniels pushing through the people, his weathered face grim. The old lawman took in the scene quickly, his eyes moving from Roger to Teresa to Samuel and back again. "What is going on here?" Daniels demanded. "This man is trying to force Miss Emerson to leave with him against her will," Mrs. Patterson said before Roger could speak. "She has told him no repeatedly, but he will not listen." "She is my wife," Roger protested, showing the sheriff the marriage certificate. "I have a legal right to take her home." Sheriff Daniels examined the paper, then looked at Teresa. "Is this legitimate? Are you legally married to this man?" "I was," Teresa said quietly. "But I left him because he was violent toward me. I have been gone for 3 months. I do not consider myself his wife anymore, even if the law does." Daniel sighed. the sound of a man who had seen too many situations like this and knew there were no good answers. Miss, legally, he is right. Marriage is a binding contract, and unless you can prove in court that he violated the terms severely enough to warrant a separation, you are still his wife. I cannot stop him from taking you if he insists. Then I will stop him, Samuel said, stepping forward. And any man who tries to help him will have to go through me and every other person here who thinks forced marriage is wrong. A chorus of agreement rose from the miners, and Sheriff Daniels held up his hands. Now hold on. We are not going to have violence in the street over this. There has to be another way. There is, Roger said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. Teresa comes with me peacefully and we leave town. Or I press charges for assault and theft. She goes to jail and I take her with me anyway once she is released into my custody as her husband. Those are the only two options. Samuel felt Teresa trembling beside him, but she stood her ground. I will take jail, she said. At least it gives me a few more days of freedom. Wait, Samuel said, an idea forming. Sheriff, what about marriage? If Teresa was married to someone else, the first marriage would be void, right? Daniels frowned. Well, technically, yes. She cannot be married to two men at once, but she is already married, so that does not help. But if her first husband was dead, she would be free to remarry, Samuel pressed. And we only have Roger's word that he is actually Roger Emerson. Anyone can get a marriage certificate printed. What if this man is lying, trying to force Miss Emerson into something against her will? I am not lying, Roger snarled. I am her husband. Prove it, Samuel challenged. Prove you are who you say you are. Because as far as I am concerned, Teresa's husband is dead. She told me herself that the last time she saw him, she hit him with a bottle and he went down bleeding. For all we know, he died of that injury, which would make her a widow and you just some man trying to kidnap her. Roger's face went purple with rage. That is ridiculous. I am standing right here. Obviously, I did not die. Obviously, someone did not die, Samuel agreed. But who is to say you are really Roger Emerson? You could be anyone. A bounty hunter he hired, a business associate trying to settle a score. Without proof, you are just a stranger harassing a woman. Sheriff Daniels looked like he was trying not to smile. The boy has a point. Do you have any identification beyond that marriage certificate? Something that proves who you are, Roger sputtered, clearly not having expected this line of questioning. I do not need to prove who I am. I have the marriage certificate. That is legal proof. Of a marriage, Daniels said slowly, but not necessarily of your identity. For all I know, the real Roger Emerson is dead and you are impersonating him. That would make this attempted kidnapping, which is a serious crime. This is insane, Roger shouted. She knows who I am. Teresa, tell them I am your husband. Teresa looked at Roger, then at Samuel, then back at the sheriff. Samuel could see the understanding dawning in her eyes, the realization of what he was trying to do. I do not know who this man is, she said clearly. My husband Roger Emerson is dead. I left him bleeding from a head wound 3 months ago in Kansas. This man looks a little like Roger, but I could not say for certain that he is the same person. After all, I thought my husband was dead. You lying little, Roger started forward, but Samuel stepped between them, his hand on his gun. I would not finish that sentence, Samuel said quietly. You have been asked to leave. I suggest you do so before things get ugly. For a moment, it looked like Roger might try to fight, his hand moving toward his concealed weapon. But he was surrounded by hostile miners, facing a sheriff who had just given him an out, and staring at a woman who clearly would rather die than go with him. The calculation was easy to make. This is not over, Roger hissed at Teresa. I will be back with proper identification, with lawyers, with whatever it takes. You are mine, Teresa, and I will not let you go. "Get out of my town," Sheriff Daniels said, his voice hard. "And if you come back without proof of who you are and a court order to back up your claims, I will arrest you for disturbing the peace. We do not take kindly to men who threaten women here." Roger stared at them all with pure hatred in his eyes, then spun and stalked to his wagon. He climbed up, took the reins, and drove away at a fast clip, the wheels kicking up dust. The crowd watched him go in silence, and it was not until he disappeared around a bend in the road that everyone seemed to breathe again. Teresa's legs gave out and Samuel caught her, holding her up as she shook with reaction. "It is okay," he murmured. "He is gone. You are safe." "For now," she whispered. "He will come back, Samuel. He will find a way. Men like Roger always do." "Then we will deal with him when he does," Samuel said firmly. "But in the meantime, we need to make sure he cannot use the law against you. Sheriff, how long would it take to get a marriage certificate here in Calistoga?" Daniels raised his eyebrows. "Planning on getting married, are you?" "If Teresa will have me," Samuel said, looking down at the woman in his arms. "I know it is fast. I know this is not the most romantic proposal. But if we are married, Roger has no claim on you. The first marriage would be void because you cannot be married to two men." "That is actually not how it works," Daniels said. "The first marriage takes precedence unless it can be legally dissolved. But," he added thoughtfully, "if the first husband is dead, as Miss Emerson just claimed, then she is free to remarry. And if she does remarry before Roger comes back with proof that he is alive and he is her husband, well, that creates one hell of a legal tangle that could take years to sort out." "And in the meantime," Teresa asked faintly, "in the meantime, you would be Mrs. Samuel Gardner, and any attempt by Roger to take you would be kidnapping a married woman, which even territorial law frowns upon," Daniels said. "It is not foolproof, but it is better than what you have now." Teresa looked up at Samuel, her gray eyes searching his face. "You would do that? Marry me to keep me safe? Even though we have only known each other a few weeks?" "I would do it to keep you safe," Samuel agreed. "But I would also do it because I love you, Teresa. I know it is fast, but I also know what I feel. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and when I think about the future, you are in it. So yes, if you will have me, I want to marry you. Not just to keep you safe, though that is reason enough, but because I want a life with you." Fresh tears spilled down Teresa's cheeks, but she was smiling now, a real smile that lit up her whole face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Gardner, because I love you too. I did not think I could ever trust a man again after Roger, but you have shown me that not all men are like him. You have given me hope and safety and something I thought I would never have again. So yes, I will marry you." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Mrs. Patterson was crying openly, dabbing at her eyes with her apron. Sheriff Daniels grinned and clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "Well then, we had better get you two married before that bastard comes back. Reverend Mitchell can do the ceremony. Let me go fetch him." The wedding took place 2 hours later in the little white church at the end of Calistoga's Main Street. Teresa wore a borrowed dress from the dressmaker, a simple but pretty thing in pale blue that brought out the color of her eyes. Mrs. Patterson had pinned flowers in her hair, wildflowers that the widow's daughter had picked from the hills. Samuel wore his best clothes, which were not fancy but were clean and pressed, and he had shaved and slicked his hair back with water. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony with half the town crammed into the small church, everyone wanting to witness the wedding and show their support. When the Reverend asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was absolute. And when Samuel slid the simple gold band he had bought from the general store onto Teresa's finger and kissed her for the first time, sealing their vows, the church erupted in celebration. The town threw an impromptu reception in the street outside the church, with food and music and dancing that lasted until well after dark. Samuel danced with his new wife, holding her close, marveling at how his life had changed in just a few short weeks. When he had set out from Montana a month ago, he had been alone, focused on rebuilding his ranch and not much else. Now he had a wife, a partner, someone to build that future with. "What are you thinking?" Teresa asked as they swayed to the music, her head resting against his chest. "That I am the luckiest man in Wyoming," Samuel said honestly. "That I found you alone on the prairie and somehow convinced you to marry me. That life is strange and wonderful, and I do not want to be anywhere else but right here with you." "I am the lucky one," Teresa murmured. "You saved me, Samuel. In every way a person can be saved. I thought my life was over, that I would spend the rest of my days running and hiding. But you gave me a home and a future and love. I did not think I deserved any of that, but you made me believe I did." They stayed in town that night, renting a room at the hotel because Mrs. Patterson insisted they should have privacy on their wedding night. Samuel was nervous, knowing Teresa's history with Roger, worried about doing or saying something that would frighten her. But she was the one who kissed him first, who led him to the bed, who whispered that she trusted him. "I want this," she said softly, her hands on his face. "I want you. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. That is the difference, Samuel. With Roger, I had no choice. But with you, everything is my choice, and I choose you." They made love gently, carefully, Samuel taking his time to show her that intimacy could be about tenderness rather than control. And afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow hotel bed, listening to the sounds of the town settling down for the night, both marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. "You think he will come back?" Teresa asked quietly in the darkness. "Probably," Samuel admitted. "But when he does, he will find that you are not alone anymore. You have a husband who will fight for you, a town that will stand with you, and the law on our side now. It is not perfect, but it is something." "It is everything," Teresa said, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "As long as I have you, I can face whatever comes." Samuel pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, and silently vowed that he would protect her no matter what it took. Roger might come back, might bring lawyers or lawmen or hell itself, but Samuel would be ready. Teresa was his wife now, and that meant something out here on the frontier. It meant family, loyalty, a bond that could not be easily broken. The next morning they rode out to Samuel's ranch together, Teresa riding behind him with her arms around his waist. The property was small by frontier standards, only about 300 acres of grassland with a creek running through it. But the house was solid, and the land was good for cattle. Samuel's father had built the house himself, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and a stone fireplace that could heat the whole main floor in winter. "It needs work," Samuel said as they stood looking at the house together. "The porch railing is loose, some of the shutters need replacing, and the roof could use new shingles in a few places. But the bones are good. My father built things to last." "It is perfect," Teresa said, and she meant it. After years of living in Roger's house, a place that had never felt like home, this small ranch with its honest disrepair felt like sanctuary. "We can fix it up together, make it ours." And that is what they did over the next few weeks, working side by side to turn the house into a home. They replaced the loose boards on the porch, patched the roof, repaired shutters. Teresa cleaned inside, washing windows, scrubbing floors, airing out rooms that had been closed up for too long. She made curtains from fabric bought at the general store, planted a garden with seeds Mrs. Patterson gave her, and slowly filled the house with touches that made it feel lived in and loved. Samuel worked on the land, repairing fences and the small barn, preparing for the cattle he hoped to buy in the fall. He worked harder than he had in years, driven by the knowledge that he was not just rebuilding his father's dream anymore, but creating something new with Teresa. Every fence post he set, every board he nailed, was an investment in their future together. They fell into an easy rhythm, rising with the sun to work, taking their meals together, spending the evenings on the porch watching the light change on the mountains. Samuel taught Teresa to shoot, both rifle and revolver, insisting that she know how to protect herself if trouble came when he was out working the range. She was a quick learner, her hand steady, her eye good, and knowing she could defend herself gave them both some peace of mind. "You are a natural," Samuel said one afternoon as Teresa hit the target dead center 3 times in a row. "Remind me never to make you angry." "I think you are safe," Teresa said with a smile. "You are the only person I trust not to hurt me." But even as they built their life together, the shadow of Roger hung over them. Samuel had made inquiries through his contacts in town, and word came back that Roger had indeed returned to Kansas City. But he was asking questions, hiring lawyers, making it clear he had not given up on reclaiming Teresa. The knowledge kept Samuel alert, always watching the horizon, always aware of who was riding toward the ranch. 2 months after the wedding, in late October when the leaves were turning gold and the air had the sharp bite of coming winter, a rider came to the ranch. Samuel was working on reinforcing the barn when he saw the dust cloud approaching, and his hand instinctively went to the rifle leaning against the barn wall. But as the rider got closer, he recognized Sheriff Daniels on his dappled gray mare. "Sheriff," Samuel called, setting down the rifle but staying alert. "What brings you out here?" Daniels dismounted, his expression grim. "Got some news I thought you should hear in person. Roger Emerson is back in Calistoga, and this time he brought a lawyer and a federal marshal with him. They have paperwork, Samuel. Proper identification, the original marriage certificate, and a writ from a judge in Missouri demanding that Teresa be returned to her legal husband." Samuel felt his stomach drop. "Can they do that? We are married now." "That is where it gets complicated," Daniel said. "The federal marshal says your marriage is not legal because Teresa was already married when she wed you. He is calling it bigamy, says the second marriage is void. The lawyer is threatening to charge both of you with fraud, and Roger is pushing for charges against Teresa for assault and theft from when she left him in Kansas." "That is ridiculous," Samuel said, anger heating his blood. "She left him because he was beating her." "I know that, and you know that, but proving it in court is another matter," Daniel said. "And that federal marshal has jurisdiction. I cannot just ignore a federal writ. He is giving you and Teresa until tomorrow morning to come into town. If you do not show up voluntarily, he is authorized to come out here and take her by force." Samuel looked toward the house, where Teresa was inside making bread, unaware of the threat bearing down on them. "What are our options?" "Not many good ones," Daniels admitted. "You could run, take Teresa and head for California or Oregon, try to disappear. But that makes you both fugitives, and there is no guarantee Roger would not follow. Or you can come in tomorrow and face this head-on, let the lawyer and the marshal hear your side, and hope for the best." "Hope for the best," Samuel repeated bitterly. "Against a federal writ and a lawyer Roger probably paid a fortune to." "I did not say it was a good option," Daniel said. "But running means always looking over your shoulder, never being able to settle anywhere. Is that the life you want for Teresa?" Samuel thought about Teresa learning to shoot, tending her garden, the way she smiled when they sat on the porch in the evenings. She had just started to feel safe, to believe she could have a normal life. Running would destroy that fragile peace. "We will come in tomorrow," Samuel said finally. We will face this properly. But Sheriff, I need you to promise me something. If this goes badly, if they try to take her back to Roger, you stop them. Whatever it takes. I will not let her go back to that life." Daniels met his eyes evenly. "I will do everything in my power within the law, Samuel. But if it comes down to going against a federal marshal, I have to be straight with you. That is a fight you cannot win. They have the law on their side, and out here, the law is all that keeps us from being animals." "Some things are more important than law," Samuel said quietly. "If they try to take her, there will be blood. I want you to know that now, so there are no surprises tomorrow." "I figured as much," Daniel said heavily. "Which is why I rode out here to warn you, give you a chance to think this through with a clear head. Maybe there is an option we have not considered yet." Samuel spent the rest of the day thinking about it, but no brilliant solution presented itself. That evening, he told Teresa what was happening, watching her face pale as he explained about the federal marshal and the writ. She listened without interrupting, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "So our marriage means nothing," she said when he finished. "Everything we built these past 2 months, it was all for nothing." "It was not for nothing," Samuel said fiercely, taking her hands in his. "We love each other. That matters. That means something, even if the law says otherwise." "But the law is what they will use to tear us apart," Teresa said, and there was defeat in her voice. "I should run, Samuel, tonight before they can come for me. At least then you would not be in trouble for helping me." "No," Samuel said flatly. "We are not running and we are not splitting up. We face this together as husband and wife, and we trust that there are still good people in the world who will see the truth of what Roger did to you." "That is a lot of faith to put in strangers," Teresa said sadly. "Then we put our faith in each other," Samuel replied. "I love you, Teresa. I will fight for you with everything I have, and if the law fails us, then we will find another way. But I am not giving up, and I am not letting you go." They held each other that night, neither sleeping much, both acutely aware that this might be their last night together. In the darkness, Teresa whispered all the things she would miss: the sound of Samuel's voice when he came in from working, the way he looked at her like she was precious, the life they had started to build together. Samuel listened and promised that this was not the end, that he would find a way to keep her safe, even if he was not sure how. Morning came too soon, cold and gray with the promise of winter in the air. They dressed silently, Samuel in his best clothes again, Teresa in the blue dress she had been married in because it seemed appropriate somehow. They rode into Calistoga together, and Samuel could feel Teresa trembling behind him, her arms tight around his waist. The meeting was held in the town hall, a small building used for everything from church services to dances to legal proceedings. Roger was there with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed man in an expensive suit who looked distinctly uncomfortable being in a frontier mining town. The federal marshal was there too, a weather-beaten man in his 50s who looked like he had seen too much to be impressed by much of anything. Sheriff Daniels was present, along with Mrs. Patterson and several other townspeople who had come to show support for Teresa and Samuel. Reverend Mitchell was there too, looking troubled but determined. The room felt too small, too crowded with tension and competing agendas. The lawyer started by laying out the facts as he saw them. Roger and Teresa had been legally married in Missouri in 1876. Teresa had left without obtaining a legal separation or divorce. Her marriage to Samuel was therefore void as bigamy. She needed to return to Missouri with her legal husband to face charges for assault and theft. "This is a clear-cut case," the lawyer concluded. "The law is on our client's side. Mrs. Emerson needs to accept that her actions have consequences and return home to fulfill her legal obligations as a wife." "May I speak?" Teresa asked, her voice quiet but steady, The federal marshal nodded. "Go ahead, madam." Teresa stood, and Samuel saw her squaring her shoulders, gathering her courage. "Everything the lawyer said is technically true. I did marry Roger Emerson in Missouri. I did leave him without legal permission, but what he did not mention is why I left. Roger beat me regularly. He controlled every aspect of my life. And when I tried to leave the first time, he broke my arm and told me if I ever tried again, he would kill me. I lived in fear for 5 years until I finally found the courage to run. My client denies these allegations," the lawyer said smoothly. "And even if they were true, which they are not, they do not change the legal facts. Marriage is a binding contract. You cannot simply walk away because you are unhappy." "I walked away because I feared for my life," Teresa said, her voice rising. "And I hit him with that bottle because he found me and tried to drag me back. It was self-defense, not assault." "She is a liar," Roger spoke up, his voice dripping with false concern. "I love my wife. I have never raised a hand to her except in justified discipline when she disobeyed me. That is a husband's right and responsibility." The words made Samuel's blood boil, but he forced himself to stay seated, to let Teresa speak for herself. This was her fight, her chance to be heard, and he would not take that from her by losing his temper. "A husband's right to discipline his wife does not include breaking bones and leaving bruises," Mrs. Patterson said sharply. "I have seen plenty of women who were disciplined by their husbands, and it is just a pretty word for beating." "You are a brute, Mr. Emerson, and everyone in this room knows it. You are an old woman who is interfering in matters that do not concern you," the lawyer said coldly. "Your opinion is not relevant to the legal facts." "Then let the legal facts include this," Reverend Mitchell said, standing. "I performed the marriage ceremony between Samuel Gardner and Teresa Emerson. I did so in good faith, believing that Teresa's first husband was dead, as she claimed. She came to me as a frightened woman seeking protection, and I saw no reason to doubt her word. If the marriage is invalid due to legal technicalities, that is not her fault or Samuel's. They acted in good faith." "Good faith does not override the law," the lawyer countered. "The first marriage takes precedence. Mrs. Emerson must return with her legal husband." "I will not," Teresa said clearly. "I would rather go to jail than return to Roger. At least in jail I would be safe from him." "That can be arranged," the lawyer said. "If you refuse to return voluntarily, Marshal, you have the authority to take her into custody on charges of assault and theft. She can be extradited to Missouri to face trial." The federal marshal had been sitting quietly through all of this, his weathered face unreadable. Now he spoke for the first time, his voice gravelly with age and years of smoking. "Before I do anything, I want to see the proof of these allegations Mr. Emerson is making. The assault, the theft. What evidence do you have beyond your word?" Roger looked surprised by the question. "My word should be enough. I am her husband. Why would I lie?" "People lie all the time," the marshal said flatly. "Especially in domestic cases. So I am asking, do you have witnesses to this assault? Medical records showing your injury? Proof that money was stolen?" "I have this," Roger said, pulling back his hair to show a scar along his hairline. "From where she hit me with the bottle, I could have died." "But you did not," the marshal observed. "And a scar proves you were injured, not who injured you or why. Could have gotten that in a bar fight for all I know. What about the theft? How much money are you claiming was stolen?" "About $200, Roger said. "Money I had saved for our future." "Do you have any proof you had that money? Bank records, witnesses who saw it?" the marshal pressed. Roger's face was turning red. "It was in a box in our home. I do not need witnesses for my own money." "So you have no proof the money existed, no proof it was stolen if it did exist, and no witnesses to the alleged assault beyond your own word, the marshal summarized. That is a pretty thin case to be demanding a federal arrest. The lawyer jumped in. The theft and assault charges are secondary to the main issue, which is that Teresa Emerson is legally married to our client and needs to return home. Everything else can be sorted out once she fulfills her legal obligations. Her legal obligations, Samuel spoke up, unable to stay silent any longer, seem to include being beaten and abused by a man who sees her as property. That is not a marriage, that is slavery. How I run my household is none of your concern, Roger snapped. She is my wife, and what happens between us is private. Not when it involves assault, the marshal said, and everyone in the room looked at him in surprise. I have been a lawman for 30 years, and I have seen my share of men who think marriage gives them the right to brutalize women. The law might be on your side, Mr. Emerson, but that does not mean I have to like it or you. Then you will do your duty and enforce the law, the lawyer said sharply. The marshal was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from Roger to Teresa to Samuel and back again. Finally, he said, the law says she is your wife, Mr. Emerson, but the law also says I have discretion in how I enforce writs like this. And my discretion tells me that taking a woman back to a situation where she fears for her life is not justice. It is just legal brutality. You cannot refuse to enforce a federal writ, the lawyer said, his voice rising. That is dereliction of duty. I am not refusing, the marshal said. I am saying that before I enforce it, I want a full investigation into the allegations of abuse. I want witnesses interviewed. I want Teresa Emerson to have legal representation, and I want a judge who is not in Missouri to review the case. If after all that the decision is still that she has to return, then I will enforce the writ. But not before. That could take months, the lawyer protested. Then Mr. Emerson should have thought of that before he drove his wife away with his fists, the marshal said bluntly. If he is telling the truth, and he is a good husband who has been wronged, then a few months of investigation will prove that. And if he is lying, well, then justice will be served. Either way, I am not taking a woman into custody today based on nothing but his word. Roger exploded out of his chair, his face purple with rage. This is an outrage. I have rights. The law is on my side. Sit down, Mr. Emerson, the marshal said coldly, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. Or I will arrest you for disturbing the peace. Your rights end where they start violating someone else's safety. The room held its breath as Roger and the marshal faced off, but finally Roger sat down, his hands clenched into fists, his whole body vibrating with fury. The lawyer tried to argue more, but the marshal cut him off. My decision is final. Mrs. Emerson will remain in Calistoga under her own recognizance while I conduct a proper investigation. If either party does not like that, they can appeal to my superiors, but I will tell you right now that Marshal Kane agrees with me on these matters. We have worked together for 15 years and he will back my decision. Thank you, Teresa whispered, tears running down her face. Thank you for listening. Do not thank me yet, the marshal said. This is not over, just delayed. And you need to understand, Mrs. Emerson, that the law is probably still going to side with your husband in the end. Marriage is a serious contract, and judges do not like to see it broken without very good cause. Being beaten is not good enough cause, Samuel asked bitterly. It should be, the marshal said. But often it is not, especially if there is no proof. So I am giving you time. Use it to build a case. Find witnesses, get medical testimony if you saw a doctor about your injuries, anything that can prove your allegations. Because without proof, it is your word against his, and the law tends to favor the husband in those situations. The meeting broke up with Roger and his lawyer stalking out, making threats about appeals and complaints to higher authorities. The marshal pulled Samuel aside before leaving. "I bought you some time, son. Maybe a few months, maybe more if I can slow things down. But eventually this is going to come to a head. You need to be ready for that. Decide now what you are willing to risk to keep her." "Everything," Samuel said without hesitation. "I will risk everything." "I figured you would say that," the marshal said with something that might have been approval. "Just remember, there are more ways to fight than with guns. Sometimes the smartest thing is to disappear before the fight even starts." Over the next few weeks, Samuel and Teresa threw themselves into building the case for her freedom, but it was slow, discouraging work. Teresa had never seen a doctor about her injuries because Roger would not allow it. She had no family or friends in Kansas City who could testify to the abuse because Roger had isolated her from everyone. The only witnesses to their marriage were people Roger knew, people who would lie for him without hesitation. "I do not know how to prove something when there is no evidence," Teresa said one evening, her frustration and fear evident. "Everything Roger did, he was careful to hide. The bruises were always where my clothes would cover them. He never hit me in front of witnesses. It was all behind closed doors where no one could see." "Then we will find another way," Samuel said, though he was not sure what that way would be. "We still have time. The marshal is on our side." But time was running out faster than they hoped. Word came through the telegraph that Roger's lawyer had filed an appeal with the territorial court, demanding immediate enforcement of the writ. The marshal was fighting it, but his superiors were starting to question his delays. And Roger himself had taken a room at Calistoga's hotel, a constant malevolent presence in town, watching and waiting. "He is not going to give up," Teresa said. "I can feel it. He will find a way to take me back, and when he does, he will kill me for embarrassing him like this. I know how he thinks. I am not a person to him, I am a possession that dared to run away. He will make an example of me." "Then we do what the marshal suggested," Samuel said. "We disappear, tonight. We take the horses, whatever we can carry, and we ride for California. It is a big state. We can get lost there, start over with new names, and live the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders," Teresa asked. "Always wondering when Roger or the law will find us. That is not living, Samuel. That is just a different kind of prison." "It is better than losing you," Samuel said desperately. "Teresa, I cannot stand by and let them take you back to him. I would rather spend the rest of my life running than lose you to that monster." She cupped his face in her hands, her eyes full of love and sorrow. "You are a good man, Samuel Gardner, the best man I have ever known, and I love you more than I can say, but I cannot ask you to give up everything you have built, everything your parents built, to run away with me. This ranch is your legacy. I will not take that from you." "The ranch means nothing without you," Samuel said fiercely. "You are my legacy now. You and the life we could have together. So we run and we start over and we build something new, together." Before Teresa could respond, they heard the sound of horses approaching fast. Samuel grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. A half-dozen riders were coming up the road to the ranch, and even in the dim light he recognized Roger in the lead. "He is here," Samuel said grimly. "Get your gun and go upstairs. Barricade yourself in the bedroom. Do not come out until I call for you." "I am not leaving you to face him alone," Teresa protested, but Samuel was already pushing her toward the stairs. "If they get past me, you shoot anyone who comes through that door. Anyone, understand? I do not care if they are wearing a marshal's badge or carrying a writ. You protect yourself." He kissed her hard and fast. "I love you. Now go." Teresa ran up the stairs, and Samuel heard the bedroom door slam and furniture being moved to block it. Good. She would be safe up there, at least temporarily. Now he just had to figure out how to stop 6 men who probably had the law on their side. The riders stopped in front of the house, and Roger dismounted, flanked by 5 rough-looking men who were clearly hired guns. The federal marshal was not with them, which told Samuel everything he needed to know about the legality of this visit. "Gardner," Roger shouted, "send my wife out. I am done playing games. She comes with me now or we come in and get her. Your choice." "She is not your wife anymore," Samuel called back through the door. "She is mine, and she is not going anywhere with you." "The law says different," Roger shouted. "I have the writ right here. This is legal, Gardner. You cannot stop me." "The marshal said no enforcement until after the investigation," Samuel countered. "So you can take your writ and your hired guns and get off my property before I start shooting." "You are outnumbered 6-1, Roger said. "Be smart, give her up and walk away. You can find another woman." "But if you fight me on this, you will die and I will take her anyway. So really, you are just deciding whether you die tonight or not." Samuel considered his options, which were limited. He could fight, but Roger was right. 6 against 1 were bad odds even if Samuel was a good shot. He could surrender, but that would mean giving up Teresa, which was not going to happen. Or he could stall, hope for some kind of miracle. "Let me talk to her," Samuel called out. "Give me 5 minutes to convince her to come peacefully. That has to be better for everyone than a gunfight." Roger considered this. "You have 2 minutes. If she is not out here by then, we are coming in." Samuel ran up the stairs and found Teresa standing behind the barricade with her revolver in her hands. "I heard everything," she said. "We fight." "We cannot win this fight," Samuel said. "There are too many of them." "Then we die fighting," Teresa said simply. "I will not go back to him, Samuel. I would rather die here with you than live one more day as his prisoner." Samuel looked at this woman he loved, seeing the determination in her eyes, and knew she meant every word. They would fight together, and if they died, at least they would die free. But before he could say anything, they heard more horses approaching, lots of them, and shouting from outside. Samuel ran to the window and saw the most beautiful sight of his life. Sheriff Daniels was there with at least 20 men from town, miners and ranchers and townspeople, all armed and facing down Roger's hired guns. The federal marshal was there too, looking angry as hell. "What is going on here, Emerson?" the marshal demanded. "I told you there would be no enforcement of that writ until after the investigation." "I am just taking my wife home," Roger said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "That is my legal right." "Your legal right does not include bringing armed men to threaten citizens in the middle of the night," the marshal said coldly. "You just committed about 5 different crimes, including armed assault and attempted kidnapping. So I am going to give you one chance to ride out of here peacefully before I arrest all of you." "You cannot arrest me," Roger blustered. "I have a writ." "Your writ is not worth the paper it is written on while you are breaking territorial law," the marshal said. "And these men are witnesses that you attempted to take Mrs. Gardner by force against the terms of my investigation. So either you leave right now, or you spend the next few months in a territorial prison waiting for trial. Your choice." Roger looked at the armed townspeople, at the marshal's hand on his gun, at the sheer impossibility of getting Teresa now. His face twisted with rage, but he was smart enough to know when he was beaten. "This is not over," he said, swinging back into his saddle. "I will appeal this to the highest court in the territory. She is mine by law, and I will get her back." "Good luck with that," the marshal said. "Now get out of my sight before I change my mind about arresting you." Roger and his men rode off into the darkness, and Samuel sagged against the wall in relief. Teresa had come downstairs and was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face as the townspeople cheered and the marshal came over to check on them. "How did you know?" Samuel asked Sheriff Daniels. "Mrs. Patterson," the sheriff said with a grin. "She has been watching Roger since he got to town. When she saw him gathering those men and riding out toward your place, she raised the alarm. We got here as fast as we could." "Thank you," Teresa said, her voice breaking. "All of you, you saved us." "We take care of our own," one of the miners said. "You are one of us now, Mrs. Gardner. That means something out here." The marshal pulled Samuel aside while Teresa was thanking the others. "That appeal Roger mentioned, he will probably win it. I have bought you all the time I can, but eventually a judge is going to rule that the writ is valid and needs to be enforced. When that happens, I will not be able to help you." "I know," Samuel said. "We will be ready." "Ready how?" the marshal asked. "You planning to run?" "If we have to," Samuel admitted. "I will not let him take her." "I figured as much," the marshal said. "Which is why I am going to give you some advice. California does not have extradition agreements with every state. If you happen to settle somewhere remote, somewhere the law did not look too close at who people used to be, you might be able to make a life there. I am not saying you should run," he added. "Just that if you did, there are places you could go where Roger would have a hard time finding you." "Thank you," Samuel said, understanding what the marshal was really saying. "We will keep that in mind." After everyone left and they were alone again, Samuel and Teresa sat on the porch in the darkness, holding hands, neither speaking for a long time. Finally, Teresa said, "We cannot keep living like this. Always waiting for the next crisis, the next time Roger shows up with men and guns. This is not a life." "I know," Samuel said. "So what do you want to do? We can run like the marshal suggested, or we can stay and keep fighting." "Either way, I am with you." Teresa was quiet, thinking. Then she said, "I want to fight. Not with guns, but with the truth. The marshal said we needed proof of what Roger did. Well, maybe there is proof. Maybe there are other women he hurt before me. Men like Roger do not suddenly become monsters. They build up to it. If we can find his past, show a pattern of abuse, maybe that would be enough." "That would mean going back to Kansas City," Samuel said. "Investigating his life there. It would be dangerous." "Less dangerous than running for the rest of our lives," Teresa said. "And maybe, if we can prove what he is, we can stop him from hurting anyone else. I am tired of being a victim, Samuel. I want to fight back." So that is what they did. Samuel sent telegrams to contacts he had in Kansas City, asking questions about Roger Emerson's past. He hired a lawyer in Cheyenne to research Roger's business dealings and personal history. And slowly, over the next few weeks, a picture emerged. Roger had been married before, twice. His first wife had died in a suspicious fall down the stairs. His second wife had disappeared completely, with Roger claiming she ran off with another man, though her family had never believed it. There were reports of violence, of women Roger had hurt, but nothing that had ever led to charges because the women were too afraid to testify. The lawyer put together a file of evidence and testimonies, affidavits from people who had known Roger and witnessed his violence. It was not perfect, but it was something, more than Teresa and Samuel had when they started. They presented it to the federal marshal, who forwarded it to the territorial court with a recommendation that the writ be overturned based on credible evidence of domestic abuse. The waiting was agonizing. Samuel and Teresa tried to go about their lives, working the ranch, planning for the spring when they hoped to buy cattle. But there was always the shadow of Roger hanging over them, the knowledge that everything could be taken away with one court decision. The answer came in late November as the first snow was falling on the mountains. A telegram from the marshal saying the territorial court had ruled in Teresa's favor. The writ was overturned. Her marriage to Roger was annulled on grounds of extreme cruelty. Her marriage to Samuel was recognized as legal and binding. She was free. Teresa read the telegram 3 times before she believed it, then she collapsed into Samuel's arms, sobbing with relief. "It is over," she kept saying. "It is really over. It is over," Samuel confirmed, holding her tight. "You are safe now. We are safe." But they both knew Roger would not accept this easily. And sure enough, a week later, word came that Roger had been arrested in Kansas City on suspicion of murdering his second wife. The evidence Samuel's lawyer had gathered had prompted the police to reopen the case, and new witnesses had come forward. Roger would likely spend the rest of his life in prison if he did not hang. "He cannot hurt anyone else," Teresa said when she heard the news. "That is what matters. We stopped him." Winter came to the Wyoming plains, and Samuel and Teresa settled into the rhythm of married life, making plans for the ranch and the future. On Christmas morning, Teresa told Samuel she was pregnant. They had a child on the way, a new life to celebrate the freedom they had fought so hard to win. "I want to name him Samuel if it is a boy," Teresa said, her hand on her still flat stomach. "After the man who saved me, after my husband who gave me a life worth living. And if it is a girl?" Samuel asked, his own hand covering hers. "Patience," Teresa said. "After Mrs. Patterson, because she taught me that sometimes you have to wait for the good things in life, but they are worth the wait." But when the baby came in late July of 1882, it was a boy, healthy and strong with his mother's gray eyes and his father's dark hair. They named him Samuel Gardner, Jr., and he was the first of 5 children they would have over the next 10 years. 3 boys and 2 girls who filled the ranch house with noise and laughter and love. Samuel expanded the ranch over the years, buying back more of the land his father had owned and building the cattle operation into something substantial. Teresa ran the household and raised the children, but she also became known in Calistoga as someone who would help women in bad situations, offering them work and protection, and a safe place to start over. She and Mrs. Patterson ran what amounted to an underground railroad for abused women, helping dozens of them escape and start new lives. The ranch prospered, the children grew, and Samuel and Teresa grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They never forgot those early days when everything hung in the balance, when love and courage were all they had against the law and the world. Those memories made them appreciate what they had built, made them value each other more. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Teresa back to the place where he had found her, that wide prairie where she had been standing alone at sunrise all those years ago. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" he asked. "I said I was running from my past," Teresa replied, her hair now streaked with gray, her face lined with age but her eyes still the same storm cloud gray that had captured his heart. "And now?" Samuel asked. "Now I am running toward my future," Teresa said, taking his hand. "Every day with you is a gift I never thought I would have. You saved me, Samuel Gardner, and I saved you right back. We saved each other." They stood there together as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the prairie in gold, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life worth living. Behind them, 20 years of memories and 5 children and a ranch that thrived. Ahead of them, whatever years remained to be spent together, Samuel pulled Teresa close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "I love you," he said. "Then, now, always." "Always," Teresa agreed, and in her voice was all the hope and healing that love had brought them, all the joy of a life reclaimed and a future seized. Their story became legend in Calistoga. told and retold around fires and dinner tables. The tale of the cowboy who found a woman alone at sunrise and loved her enough to fight the world for her freedom. It was a story about courage and justice and the power of community to protect the vulnerable. But most of all, it was a love story, proof that even in the harsh world of the frontier, even when the law failed and violence threatened, love could triumph. Samuel and Teresa Gardner lived out their days on that ranch in Wyoming, surrounded by children and grandchildren, respected and loved by everyone who knew them. They died within months of each other in 1918, both of them in their 60s, both of them content with the lives they had lived and the love they had shared. Their children inherited the ranch and kept it running for another generation, keeping alive the memory of their parents' courage. The house Samuel's father built still stands today, weathered by time but strong, a testament to the enduring power of love built on respect and equality rather than ownership and control. And sometimes, on clear mornings when the sun rises over the prairie, people say you can still see them there, Samuel and Teresa Gardner, standing hand in hand the way they did on their 20th anniversary, forever young, forever in love, forever free.